1 minute past 9 already. If you will perhaps just be a bit patient for another minute or two. The gentleman is just trying to determine where his colleagues is this morning. Good morning to all members. Good morning to our guests, our officials. This is the ad hoc committee on the appointment of the Public Service Commissioner. And it is Wednesday, the 31st of May. I do apologize for us running a bit late. We had to wait on our guests to arrive. I'm happy that you were able to join us this morning. Apologies received is that of Honourable Westhuizen, Honourable Bartman and Honourable Christians. Colleagues, just as a brief background, I'm sure all of you know, especially the members and our guests from the Public Service Commission, understands why we are here this morning, but just for the record, on the 2nd of March this year, the House adopted the motion to appoint an ad hoc committee to give effect to Section 1968BI of the Constitution, 1996, read with Section 43B of the Public Service Commission Act, 1997, Act 46 of 1997, to consider applications and to recommend to the House a candidate for nomination by the Premier for appointment to serve on the Public Service Commission. The ad hoc committee at the WCPP consists out of 15 members, and those members were appointed in accordance with Rule 120 of our standing rules, with the membership allocated as follows: the Democratic Alliance 8 members, the African National Congress 2 members, the EFF 1 member, the Good Party 1 member, the ACDP 1 member, and the Freedom Front Plus 1 member, and as well as Al Jamaa 1 member. That is the representation of this ad hoc committee. On the 16th of March, the committee had its first meeting where we then subsequently elected the chairperson. That is myself, Wendy Kaiser Philander. On the 3rd of May, we met again. And then as part of our resolutions, to invite the Public Service Commission to brief this committee on the work of the Commission and to only advertise for the vacancy after we had this briefing and the committee members had the opportunity to deliberate and to ask the necessary questions that they see fit. And that brings us to today, the 31st of May 2023, to this meeting. We welcome all of you to this meeting this morning. And at this stage, I will ask members for the record to kindly introduce themselves and then to yourselves as well.
Good morning, Chair. Gerrit Pretorius, alternating for member van der Westhuizen.
Morning, Chair. Morning to everybody. My name is Christopher Fry. I'm a member of this committee.
Morning,
Good morning, Chair. Khalil Karakay.
Good morning, Chairperson Khalid Sayed, member of the committee.
Good morning, Chair. Isaac Murelesi, member of the committee.
Just one moment, member class. We note that you are online. We're just giving the opportunity to the members in chambers.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. I'm Peter Murray, member of this committee.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. My name is Matlodi Maseko, and I'm the member of the committee.
Good morning, I'm Gillian Postman, a member of this committee.
Thank you very much. That is all members in chambers. Online.
Good morning, Chair. Khalil Barankais.
Good morning, Honourable Brankais. And member class.
Good morning, member class. I'm in the meeting.
Good morning, member. Welcome to the meeting. We're waiting for you in chambers, but we're happy that you were able to join online. Professor Fakedi, good morning and welcome. You're most welcome to do your introductions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, both here present and those joining virtually. My name is Somadoda Fikeni, the chairperson of the Public Service Commission, and I am coming with my fellow Commissioner Nancy Ngwenya, and our Office of the Public Service Commission, Chief Director Cameron Jacobs is the one who will take us through the presentation. We were supposed to also be coming in with Dr. Boshoff, who is our resident commissioner in the Free State, but unfortunately, his province called him for another, important engagement, which came in at short notice. Perhaps as a preamble, if you so allow, Chairperson, I cannot express words of gratitude for you granting us the permission to interact with you on this very important matter, because very often, in many other instances, nationally and provincially, you find that you just see an advert without any interactive session because the committee or the legislature or parliament will have just read chapter 10 of the institution, section 196. And yet the institution itself has evolved over many years with the legislations, with internal practices, that it would actually be of great benefit to interact and get some questions on the nature of the institution itself and the journey it has undertaken and the journey it is undertaking into the future. That in itself is very much appreciated, because any question you ask, just before Mr. Jacobs makes a presentation, I just want to start by saying there's never been a time where Public Service Commission has been so important as now, because building a capable, ethical, developmental state as a #1 priority has become the most critical intervention in professionalizing our public service and creating a meritocratic institution. That in itself would answer the many questions in terms of service delivery monitoring. It would answer the many questions raised by Justice Zondo, whom we met, and he said, I write extensively on the importance of the PSC and why it has not been invoked in the past. The issues of corruption, if you have a professionalized public service, you do have less of those instances. Service delivery becomes very important and more important, irrespective of which administration comes in or go out. If you have a professional layer, services will always be there. So that's one thing. There are many reforms taking place at this moment. Professionalization of public service, which Cabinet has approved the framework. PSC is working on its implementation, because we understand that most of these, they tend to be a promise of a policy, but it fails at the level of implementation. The promotion of constitutional values and principles is also another thing, because we realize that in the Zondo State Capture Commission and in several other instances, well-educated people, cognitively sound, fail at the level of ethics. And now the campaign that the PSC is driving in promoting these ethics and in making sure that people are not just aware of the ethical conduct, but they internalize those. So we're working on the ecosystem of that, what universities, training institutions, and so forth could be doing. The Afrobarometer indicated the in trying to see is an extended arm of the legislature and parliament. we're trying to do in ODIM. Now, that means the quality, the experience, the competence of the person that comes into the Public Service Commission becomes far more important. And this is even reflected in the professionalization framework to say that will also be very important in the sense that if we're the custodian of good governance, we cannot be measured at the same level as other public servants. We should be one level up and be exemplary. We're happy then that we're given the opportunity here to state that. But one of the challenges we've experienced of late has been the management of transitions. When one term ends, as we are allowed to have one term, or that one term, which is 5 years, is renewable for another 5 years and no more. 10 years is maximum. Or it is open to, the contestation when you open up the market. What we have experienced is that there is a time when replacement has taken 2 years. In Mpumalanga, as we speak, in 2019, that's when the last person was there, and they are still working on the replacement. And that has stretched us so thin in a sense of having to get someone who is supposed to look after his or her province to be taking care of that province. In the Northwest, at least that one, processes start early. That's why we're very happy that you start the processes early so that there is a seamless transition to that effect. The other issue that I want to allude to briefly, we have no control over the composition of the PSC because legislatures and parliaments are the ones who appoint. But we have an expressed interest in terms of saying the constitutional values of diversity and inclusivity should be very central to that exercise. And that is why we have emphasized that part. And lastly, the issue of skills set is very important in this case because sometimes we may end up appointing unknowingly people who might all be, priests. Because they happen to have equipped themselves well and so forth. But there we're dealing with administrative law issues. We're dealing with very sensitive issues or education, where the bulk of the budget is. So when we had this backlog of forensic labs, the inspections of hospitals, we overused the person because of the skill. We need legal skills as well at all times. We need several other combination of skills. So that in itself, it's what we say should be taken into account, but the integrity of the person becomes the most important because you could be armed with all kinds of qualifications with no character nor integrity. And where impartiality is needed, the independence, because that's what I like with my commission, the independence and the robustness of the manner we engage before we arrive at any decision. So we really appreciate the opportunity. This was a precursor for Cameron, who will be mindful of some of the areas I've emphasized and therefore go through the presentation. Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members.
Thank you so much, Professor Fakeni, for taking us into that extensive introductory remarks, and I'm sure the rest of the committee, as myself, has taken great value of your input. Are there any questions or comments that you would like to raise at this point based on the introductory remarks? I recognize the Honourable Marais and then
May
Honourable
we sit down while
Pretorius.
talking, Chair?
Excuse me? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Provincial, I'm very encouraged by what I heard from you. You touched on all the relevant issues, especially your independence and the quality of the people you appoint, quality of the people you appoint. How will you operate in the light of the pending bill on labor equity, which will force you to stick to race quotas? How will you, seeing that the Constitution guarantees your independence and asks of you act independently, how will you be able to circumvent that bill by appointing the best qualified person who has the necessary integrity of association or clique that now insist on being appointed? How will you keep your independence?
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Marais, for that question, because the Public Service Commission bill that now is gazetted, published, is trying to insist on that independence, because the office of the Public Service Commission was located within a department, and we said no, that may compromise our autonomy, because we also investigate the same department. And therefore, diversity to us means literally diversity. If you have a commission that is all black, or a commission that would be all white, it would not be the diversity the Constitution had aspired for. And I've raised the issue that transformation does not mean eliminating other people out of the space, but rather represent that diversity. So within our own employment processes, that diversity is not only talked about, it is being implemented. You'll see the diversity in it. But in as far as the appointment of a commissioner, we do not appoint ourselves. It is the legislatures who have the right to implement and effect that diversity. So that in itself is very important to recognize, to say, if it was according to our wish, we would stick to that diversity as the Constitution had intended, irrespective of any latest legislative iterations, which I understand are still being challenged in the Constitutional Court as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fikeni. I believe we have another member joining at the back. Good morning, Member Lecker. You can just introduce yourself for the record. No voice.
Good morning, everybody. My apologies for being late, Chair. My name is Pat Lecker. I did not raise my hand, Chairperson. It's Member Maseko who's hand is
Yes,
up.
I think once we've done the round of introductions, you were not yet here. So I just wanted you to read that into the record. You're most welcome. Thank you for joining us, member. And then Mr. Retief, I believe some of us know you, but not all of us.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning. James Retief. I'm the Manager, Stakeholder Management and Communication Services at the Western Cape Provincial Parliament.
Good morning and thank you so much for joining us. And then also two guests at the back.
Good morning, Chairperson. My name is Nozipiwo Gwaza. I'm the Parliamentary Liaison Officer of the Public Service Commission.
Thank you very much. You're most welcome.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Desmond Koba. With
Public Service Commission.
And I believe the PSC team are now full complement. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Member Pretorius and then Member Maseko.
Thank you, Chair. Professor, thank you for your introduction. You referred to the professionalization of the PSC. I don't want to be difficult, but compared to what? Surely you're not saying that it's not professional at the moment. That's the first point. The second point is, in terms of what Member Murray requested or asked, referring to the equity bill, you also remarked that you have no control over the composition of the PSC. How does that then relate to equity specifically? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. On the first instance, it's the professionalization of the public service in its entirety. And we can share that professionalization document because it's a public document. For example, it is now saying appointment will be based on merit. It is saying we will have a single public administration. In other words, standardized. You want to say parliamentary workers have different standards, local government have different standards. Among other things, PSC will be asked to approach professional boards to second panel of experts to sit in the interviews of DGs, DDGs, HODs, in addition to the situation where political heads or executive authorities would sit around and mainly be the ones who are the determinant. So it's trying to say there should be skills and induction will be more intense, and this will apply to state-owned companies as well. And the in-service training, certain compulsory training will be in place. Integrity tests will be in place. So it's a range of things that PSC is advocating for. But for PSC to live up to that challenge, PSC is in a process of repositioning itself so that it is better than what it was yesterday. So that's where we are. And on the issue of the equity, in our employment practice for the Public Service Commission office, we are applying the principle of diversity. And you'll see that as we implement. But in as far as the appointment of the commissioners, the Constitution says the legislature, the Premier, will look into that process and send the candidate to the President, which means it rests on your shoulders to see to it that that diversity is seen. We do not have any role in a direct sense of appointing a commissioner. We receive what the legislature is presenting to us for the resident commissioners in the provinces. We receive what the National Parliament is presenting to us in terms of the national-based commissioners. So I'm saying it is in your hands in terms of what would come out of this exercise. Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof. Member Maseko.
Thank you very much, Professor Fiken. I just want to find out, I mean, you talked about the diversity and you made an example of the doctor as a commissioner in one of the provinces. Now, for professionalization of PSC and looking at Western Cape, we have to also go to the process of a commissioner. The team as a chairperson that you have now, and with the skills that are needed to have that team for the country. If you have to tell us what is the other skill that you need for that a team that you have within the provinces, which one will that be? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. When I do the skill set And I also project to the outgoing commissioners. For example, Commissioner Boshoff in the Free State trained in law and administration. Commissioner Hossein in this province has worked in the NPA, in the Human Rights Commission, has worked in the Public Protector. So having that investigative and legal background. Generally, you'll then find that others are scholars in social sciences, having been managers and so forth. When I look beyond next year, I would know that the legal skill and expertise, we're going to run short of that. Now that in the Northwest we have Dr. Libalo, who's pending renewal, hopefully it works out. We'll still retain him as a person from the health, but should he not come back for any reason, we will have lost anyone with the health background. So it is that particular diversity of skills that we have. For example, you'll have Commissioner Nancy Ngwenya. The advantage in her is that she had worked in local government in Salga. In that space, we didn't have anybody in that particular space. And yet the bill says we will extend our oversight in the local government sphere. That happened without her. We would be in also a teacher. Basic education and higher education is going through challenges. Now we do have, for example, Professor Mandla Makanya, who was the Vice Chancellor for 10 years of UNISA. We know that in higher education, science and technology, Dr. Zugi Swam Kolombo is also in the research and so forth. We have this particular team. We do have Commissioner Barkers from KZN, who has been an HOD for a longer period and has worked in the security cluster. So you know that when we're dealing with the issues of policing, when we go to that particular person and so forth. And it is that complementarity of skills. Myself, public policy analyst, having been an academic in higher education for more than 3 decades, but also having worked in the last 7 years in the scenario planning, future trends, foresights, and so forth. I bring that. I've chaired 7 other boards before the PSC. We bring that mix, and each time we're dealing with the situations, we take that into account. And we wish that even provinces would infuse that, but also infuse it, as I often emphasize, knowing that the future of the country in some provinces, in some municipalities, look coalition. Will you have the agility, the independence of dealing with everybody? That diversity IQ, that understanding of, the dynamics on the ground, and still have your heart and passion on one most important thing, the citizen and the resident who needs to be serviced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fikile. Member Marais, is that a new question or follow-up or one for clarity? We will be diving into the presentation which deals with the roles and responsibilities. Follow-up. I'll grant you the opportunity, Member.
Professor, I don't doubt your qualifications. Let me first make it quite clear, and I think just your eloquence already impressed. But when it comes back to equity, Eastern Cape, KZN, Northern Cape, Gauteng, Limpopo, there is no equitable distribution. When it comes to the commissioners, they're all black. There are 2 vacant there. Okay? It must still be filled. Mpumalanga, Northwest, 2, same there. The only commissioner in the whole country, provincial commissioners, that's not black, is in the Western Cape. how is this going to be addressed if the law says that you've got to act in a manner and the law must say that there must be equity? Now, and you are independent. What can be done about this? Because we're trying to build a nation.
Member Marie, can I please ask you to wrap up? I think we will let us dive into the presentation and ask our question according to what is presented. And let us not forget why we are here this morning.
I thought that did I ask you a question you can't answer?
Please address the chair. Member Marie, can you please wrap up your question?
I think you're being unfair, Chair, because I'm reacting to what he said.
Yes, now we got the gist of your question. Now you are elaborating on the question. Hence I'm saying please wrap up the question.
It's wrapped up?
I think the Prof got the gist of it. Thank you very much, Member.
Thank you very much for that. First, here we are not appointing civil servants. We are appointing people who are overseeing civil service. So that particular act does not affect how you appoint any person. There's no law will say, please appoint this one, not that one, and so forth. Secondly, Dr. Boshoff in the Free State is a white male. Yasmin Bakas in the KZN is an Indian is of Indian origin. And also in the Western Cape, Leonardo Hussein is of a colored background. So there is an effort to have that diversity that we have expressed into the National Parliament, which has one outstanding candidate, Mpumalanga Northwest, to say we would love to make that diversity an essential part that must never be lost. And that in itself, to us, we're not doing it for any other reason, no PR exercise. It's a belief that we're building a nation, and that social cohesion will work when we have that diversity. So we do have that. In our staff complement, we continue to have that particular diversity, even as you look at what our latest entrants are, because we will not leave that diversity for any reason, precisely because we're an independent entity. And we also belong to the other Chapter 9, Chapter 13 institution forum, where we are saying we should safeguard this particular exercise. Not only that, I want to end by saying, Honorable Chair, even our citizens forums were very deliberate. When we went to Northern Cape, we went to the Komanani San community, brought in the Premier, the MECs to say, we're choosing this community to make sure that we look into the issues being raised in that community. Here we went into Telbach to meet with the communities there. So not only our composition, but our service offering has a very sensitive antenna to make sure that diversity is not what we talk about, but it's reflected in what we're doing. Thank you.
Very much, Professor Fakine. That rounds up the questions pertaining to your introductory remarks. Honourable members, according to our agenda, we will now receive the briefing from the PSC on their role, functions and responsibilities. Thank you very much. Mr. Jacobs, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, members, once again. I think that the preliminary discussions that we had now is actually very useful in respect of the presentation around the role and functions of the Public Service Commission. And one of the key things that we do, and some of the key things that we do, and some of the key projects that we are currently engaged in that is sort of critical. Excuse me. And then also, and how that sort of goes into the importance of the renewal of commissioners. one of the reasons why we are here. So members, if you look at slide 2, you look at the overview of the presentation. Who are we, the role and functions and responsibilities of the Public Service Commission, and that I think is quite critical, because I think that over the years there's sort of been a little bit of a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding of the Public Service Commission and what it does, and I think to some of that, the Public Service Commission over the years needs to actually take its responsibility. We often, for example, refer to the Public Service Commission as a commission that is over 100 years old. It cannot be, because of a revolutionary rupture in 1996 with the Constitution. It was established, if you look at slide 4, it was established in terms of chapter 10 of the Constitution. As an independent constitutional entity, which is not just like the Chapter 9 institutions, the Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector, the IEC, etc. But the Public Service Commission is the only institution contained in Chapter 10. It has 14 commissioners in total, 9 of whom are nominated by the Premier through recommendations by the legislatures, and the other 5 national commissioners recommended by the National Assembly. And as you know, it is headed by a chairperson. If you look on slide 5, that's just an overview of the commissioners, as you're aware. I think Honourable Member Maria spoke about the commissioners. But slide 7 is critically important, because slide 7 deals with the thrust of the Public Service Commission's mandate. And I think, like I said, it has often been sort of misinterpreted, misunderstood over the years. Even in Parliament, Public Service Commission is often confused as a Chapter 9 institution. Often it is referred to as a Chapter 9 institution. Often the Public Service Commission is only thought of as a commission that deals with grievances or investigate grievances of public service employees. Often we only refer to as looking at the constitutional values, of promoting the constitutional values and principles, but it's not so. And so Section 196.2 is the thrust of our mandate. And if you read it correctly, besides the first bit of without fear, favour and prejudice, it exists in the interest of the maintenance of 1, an effective and efficient public administration, and 2, a high standard of professional ethics in the public service. And the public administration and the public service are 2 distinct, right? And so we often get confused that we only exist for the public service. But if you read Section 196.2, there's actually a remit in terms of maintaining an effective and efficient public administration. If you look at slide 8, that just gives you a rundown of our legislative and other mandates besides the Constitution. There are sections in terms of, there is the Public Service Commission Act, firstly, which is the enabling legislation to the Constitution. But there's also the Public Service Act, where it reinforces the constitutional mandate that we are able to issue directions. And so issuing a direction is something that is mandatory, it's peremptory. A department cannot, unless it needs to wants to go to court to review that direction, it has to implement a direction issued by the Public Service Commission. And of course, we also have a mandate within terms of the Public Finance Management Act, where the matters related to financial misconduct must be reported to the Public Service Commission on a quarterly basis. So our areas of oversight are, when you look at Section 196.2 in particular, it is broad, it is huge, it is large. We deal with the organization, administration, personnel, and public administration practices of the public service. And it's not just a monitoring role that we have an oversight role, we have a research role, we have an investigative role, and we have an advocacy role across the public service, as well as to ensure, as I say to you in terms of Section 196.2, to maintain an effective and efficient public administration. And I will get to that a little bit later when we actually look at the Public Service Commission Bill and the professionalization framework. So we do have the power to advise, we have the power to make recommendations, and we have the power to give specific directions. We also, in terms of the public service regulations and treasury regulations, we do have further powers. We conduct inspections and inquiries, which is what we do on an annual basis. We also have the power to summons, although we try not to as much as possible, but we have the power to summons. And of course, we have the power to make rules. And so part of what we do, in fact, is also to look at the entire accountability framework within the public service. And when I deal with the professionalization framework later on, the public sector, because we need to start defining what public administration actually is and where the Public Service Commission begins and ends. We also given the additional power in terms of managing the National Anti-Corruption Hotline. Just in terms of responsibilities and accountabilities, as you know, and it's one of the reasons why we're also here, we are accountable to the National Assembly as the Public Service Commission. And in terms of Section 196, we report to the National Assembly in respect of our activities, but we also report to the provincial legislatures in respect of our activities across all 9 provinces. If you look at slide 13, given the importance of the National Development Plan, and given what Professor Fikeni, chairperson, indicated about the importance of building a capable state, this became part of our 5-year plan of building a capable, developmental, professional, and ethical public service. And attached to that, we have those 4 outcomes that you see there. Improved service delivery culture, which is one of the reasons why we have embarked on citizens forums across the country. Sound leadership practices in the public service, which is one of the reasons why we got involved in the professionalization framework, played a key part in the professionalization framework. A well-coordinated functioning monitoring and evaluation system. I am currently the Chief Director of Governance Monitoring. That is part of my Chief Directorate. To make sure that we have up-to-date data around the performance of the public service. And a strong, well-functioning Public Service Commission, which relates to the Public Service Commission bill that became before Parliament, I think a week or 2 ago. Slide 14 is just at a glance what we did in 22-23. I told you we do a lot of service delivery inspections across the country. That is a key indicator of where certain departments are, where the provincial government is, and where national departments are, just in terms of service delivery. National hotline, anti-corruption hotline, is an additional power. That also gives you a showcase about the amount of complaints we investigated and the amount of grievances that we investigated. We do have a vacancy rate of 7.8%, which is below the norm. And we, over the years, we have performed quite well by achieving clean audits. Just some of the areas and focus areas over the past year, financial year. If you look at slide 15 in the first place. So we've been working on the Public Service Commission bill over a while. And as I indicated to you, it was approved by Cabinet Committee and it will now be gazetted for comment. and part of the challenge, so I must confess, when I first joined the Public Service Commission 10 years ago, and I looked at the Public Service Commission Act, I must confess that I myself was aghast. It was, I'll be honest, I thought it was poorly drafted. If you compare the Public Service Commission Act to the Human Rights Commission Act, the Human Rights Act, if you compare it to the Public Protector Act, I'm a former employee of the Human Rights Commission. And so, in part, it was poorly drafted, and I think it was important to review it. Secondly, I think because, as I indicated to you, there's been such contestation over the years around the precise mandate of the Public Service Commission. Constant debate, different legal opinions over the years of where the Public Service Commission begins and ends. How do we understand public service? How do you understand public administration? When Section 187, for example, of the Constitution says that within the public administration exists the public service. And when the Constitution itself speaks about the public administration in respect of the three spheres of government. And so one would presume that if you put that together and you also understand the Public Protectors Act, that why is local government excluded from the public service? If that is the remit of the Constitution, and I'll take you back to Section 196(2), in which I indicated, the provision speaks to the public administration on the one hand and the public service on the other. And so I think it was important to start looking at the Public Service Commission Bill. And so critically what we wanted to do is, on the one hand, strengthen the independence of the Public Service Commission, because you look at Chapter 9 bodies, all Chapter 9 bodies exist as an executive on the one hand and a secretariat on the other. The Public Service Commission is the only institution that tends to exist as the Public Service Commission on the one, and the Office of the Public Service Commission as the other, as a government department. And therefore, there's that incongruence when you look at Chapter 9 bodies and how they've been established and constructed, and the Public Service Commission. So part of that was to try and strengthen the independence of the Public Service Commission so we can execute our mandate properly and effectively, and that we're not confused constantly with another government department like the DPSA because of the synergy between the work of the DPSA and the Public Service Commission. But the other aspect of it, as I indicated to you, is to reinforce the mandate, not extend the mandate, reinforce the mandate of the Public Service Commission. So what is the beginning and end of our mandate? And so we drafted this bill, it is now approved, and we hope and pray that will be extensively debated and discussed and passes constitutional muster so that the current act can be repealed and be replaced with the sixth version of the bill, I think it is. And part of the importance of the bill as well is also, if you look at slide 16, I continually say chapter, I'm not too sure why. The national framework on the professionalization, and that is incorrect, so forgive me. The national framework on the professionalization of the public sector, not the public service. The Public Service Commission, together with the National School of Government and the Department of Public Service and Administration, were instrumental in drafting the framework on the professionalization of the public sector. Initially, when we started this process, when the National School of Government started this process, it was around the public service. After further discussions in a ministerial task team, the consensus was we need to broaden this to look at the public sector. We need to look at professionalization within the public sector. And so I know that a question, I think it was asked by one of the members about professionalization and compared to what. So the professionalization of the public sector, in my view, and the Public Service Commission is coordinating the process of the implementation plan. So we've got this public professionalization of the public sector document, and it provides a number of recommendations and proposals. So one of it, which the chairperson spoke about, was extending the tenure of HODs from, in some provinces 3, in other provinces 5, but now to 10 years. To ensure that there's this clear responsibility between an executive authority and a head of department, to ensure in terms of the National Development Plan, this creation of the head of the public service. And then also just in terms of creating meritocracy within the public sector, how training, how people are inducted, improving capabilities within the public sector. But fundamentally, break it all down, it focuses on three things. One, it is paradigm change within this entire public sector. So public sector reform, essentially. Two, it is character formation. How do we instill ethics? How do we get people to actualize and internalize human rights, values and principles, constitutional values and principles? And three, it's about capability. How do we improve the capability of people within the public sector? The Public Service Commission Bill sort of works hand in glove with that professionalization framework. And to be quite honest with you, Member Murray, within the framework itself, it speaks about the recruitment and selection of commissioners to the Public Service Commission to make sure that it works along the same lines of ensuring that there's fit for purpose, there's meritocracy, etc. So it's also included there. The Public Service Commission has a particular responsibility in terms of the framework to ensure that we have a database of technical experts for the recruitment and selection process of all HODs and directors general, so that it is more equitable, that is more meritocratic, and so that we know that we're looking for. So around the recruitment and selection, part of the framework is also to ensure that there's rigidity within the recruitment and selection processes, that the right persons are appointed. And so we are busy quite heavily, I'm responsible for that in terms of my chief directorate, heavily involved in coordinating with all other key stakeholders around properly developing an implementation plan, because we don't want it to be just another plan that is technically implemented, but nothing changes. So I think that is fundamental, and that's part of the problem with our public service in general. It is rules-driven, it is compliance-driven, but it's not values-driven. It's not professionally driven, and that is what we need to change. If you look at slide 17, I spoke about the importance of citizens' forums. That's a real achievement by the Public Service Commission. We've conducted 9 citizens' forums across the country in different localities. And the purpose of the citizens' forum is to bring the citizens closer to government, to local government and provincial government, to hear firsthand what the challenges of citizens are, and then to garner commitment from government departments about how they're going to fix the challenge. And the Public Service Commission then would monitor that, ensure that there's implementation. It's a wonderful toolkit that we have developed over the years, and it actually works well. As a former provincial director in Mpumalanga, we used to be engaged in citizens' forums quite a lot. And I must say, it does really work fabulously well. And it's a real key achievement, and we expanded the reach of the citizens' forums over the past financial year. Another critical project that we are currently still involved in are 2 flagship projects that we call, one on functional accommodation and one on IT. And the functional accommodation is around challenges related to the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, the condition of various government buildings and whether they are fit for purpose, and try to determine what the challenges are in respect of that. This morning, I overheard a conversation here about Wi-Fi and connectivity. Our flagship project on information communication and technology is precisely around that, to try and understand the challenges of government departments, especially when they need to procure IT infrastructure from CETA. And we hope that, once those reports are completed, that there will be significant change around both functional accommodation as well as IT infrastructure within government. Given the area around state capture, the importance of state capture and the worry and concern around state capture, the Public Service Commission hosted a conference on anti-corruption in collaboration with the United Nations, where we focused on the cost of failure of governance and ethics and oversight. It was very well attended workshop, a very well attended conference, where a lot of important information came out.
just about what is actually going on, how we just merely touching the surface, and what needs to change if we're going to turn the tide in our country against maladministration and corruption. And we continue to do this. We also, in terms of that conference, the past 2 conferences or 3 conferences, in fact, this constant talk about whistleblowers and the threats that whistleblowers face, and how their lives are effectively distracted and destroyed when they become whistleblowers. And so, as part of that, the Public Service Commission is sort of looking at the Whistleblower Act to review it, to see how it can be strengthened. All of this, before I deal with the terms of renewal of commission, all of this speaks to members of where we are as the Public Service Commission right now. And when the chairperson spoke about the strategic repositioning of the PSC, it is precisely that. That the work of the Public Service Commission and the mandate of the Public Service Commission and the independence of the Public Service Commission currently is something that we need to safeguard. It's something that we need to hold dear, because the public service and the public sector depends on it, to be quite frank with you. And the professionalization framework currently, I know some people see it as a game changer, as a catalyst to change, and it really is. But if we don't get it right, we go further down the abyss. And so it's critically important that the independence of the PSC and the work of the PSC is in fact strengthened and not weakened as we go along. Part of the reason why we hear members is to discuss, or for you to deliberate on the renewal of commissioners and the appointment of commissioners. So just very briefly on that. And again, it speaks to, as I spoke to you when I spoke to you at the beginning, that sometimes legislation that's get drafted is not necessarily drafted as strongly as it should be. And there are often ambiguities, and there are often weaknesses, and there are often gaps. And I think around the renewal of commissioners in particular, that there exists that gap. So just in terms of the relevant sections, section 4, 5, and 7 of the Public Service Commission Act, the President may within 90 days, before the expiry term of office of a particular commissioner, renew the term of the commissioner for only 1 additional term, so commissioners have 2 terms only. But that is based on the recommendation of either the National Assembly when it comes to national commissioners, or the provincial legislatures when it comes to the 9 provinces, right? And it's based on 2 fundamental things. One, whether the commission is a fit and proper person, and whether satisfactory level of performance is maintained. But there's really silence around how the concept of performance is understood. So the legislation is silent on that, and there's also confusion of who should be responsible for it. Does the Public Service Commission do it by evaluating itself, as it were? And it often gets accused then of being player and referee on a number of different issues when it comes to investigation. But that's part of the process, that's part of the problem. PSC is asked, right? Or do the legislatures do it? Or do the Public Service Commission, as we are sitting here right now, provide you with what we are doing and tell you about what our role, what our functions are, and particularly in the Western Cape, because this is a matter that we're dealing with, how the Western Cape is doing. But anyways, the legislation is silent on it. In respect of particular judgments, a fit and proper person is described as someone that possesses integrity, objectivity, dignity, and capacity for hard work and respect for the legal order, right? Obedience to the rule of law, the right to dignity in terms of Section 10 of the Constitution, respect for others. So, as the chairperson indicated as well, that part of our problem, if you look at Mpumalanga, my former province, we haven't had a commissioner since 2019. And that becomes deleterious to the function of and the performance of that particular province. not just the Public Service Commission, but the provincial government itself, because there's a lack of oversight. Right. So we do definitely need to improve the turnaround time for the filling of commission's vacancies. And I think that in part in terms of the commission bill and particular recommendations that we would want to make down the line, I think that it is something that we would want to also focus on, just to tighten in that aspect around the renewal and vacancies of commissioners. But let me turn to the Western Cape now. And so I'm going to do two things. One, I'm just going to give you a very brief profile of the Western Cape. If you look from slide 24 onwards, very brief profile of the Western Cape in terms of what the Public Service Commission does in general, right? But I'm not going to necessarily go through it, but there's issues of sort of the accountability framework in particular, looking at grievances, national anti-corruption hotline cases, matters around financial misconduct, and the financial disclosure framework, and public administration investigations. And the thrust of it, members, is that when you look at all of this data, you will find that the Western Cape is quite, comparatively speaking, quite stable across the board. Amen. So across an 8-year period, for example, if you look at slide 24, there are 4 the Public Service Commission has been referred to. And when litigation of that, 116 deals with the approval of leave and bursaries, and 94 deals dealt with the filling of posts. But this is across the 8-year period. That's just in terms of grievances. If you look at the financial disclosure framework, there's generally sort of 100%. There is a decline to 92.7%, but there's 100% compliance with the financial disclosure framework. No real potential conflict of interest to really talk about, literally 3, and it's construed as having potential conflict of interest and not an actual potential conflict of interest. If you look at other remunerative work, 90% received approval for other remunerative work. If you look at the National Anti-Corruption Hotline, 764 cases referred. But in particular, you look at the amount of percentage feedback. Sorry, this is on slide 26. Across the board there, you see it's all green. 100%, 100%, 95%. That's the amount of feedback the Public Service Commission has received, and the amount of cases closed. So there's stability within the province in terms of a number of items by the Public Service Commission oversees and monitors and investigates. Public administration complaints, again, across from 2016 to 22-23, a total of 87 PI complaints. Relatively small when you look at the time period that we're looking at. And I think that if you look at slide 28, and I think that contributes. Yes, we need to applaud the Western Cape Provincial Government for its sterling work and its maintenance of ethics and integrity. But it's also because of that seamless relationship that currently exists between the Western Cape Provincial Government and the Public Service Commission Western Cape. As a former provincial director in Mpumalanga, I can assure you what the presence of the Public Service Commission does within a provincial government when you're there and when you're not there. So I do know that there is this seamless relationship, and the Western Cape Provincial Government is slightly different as well, because of sort of how the executive authority sits with the head of department. So I do know that there's a lot of sort of engagement with heads of departments across all departments. There's constant active engagement with ministers or MECs on complaints. I know that I think there's a quarterly meeting with the Premier. But there's constant engagement on how the provincial government is faring. If there's an investigation, constant engagement in respect of investigation and research. I do want to highlight, and of course, the Public Service Commission in general, across all 9 provinces and nationally, we do the assessment of the constitutional values and principles. It's something that Commissioner Fikeni spoke about, the chair spoke about earlier on. There's another project that we're involved in, a major flagship project about a national advocacy campaign on the constitutional values and principles. When I spoke earlier about the professionalization framework, I spoke about the importance of character formation. And so our advocacy campaign on the constitutional values and principles across the entire country is going to focus on returning to that character formation, returning to human rights and constitutional values and principles. So we do assess each and every provincial government in respect of its adherence to the constitutional values and principles. And one of some of the achievements on the second last slide, members, is some of the achievements in terms of the provinces. The assessment by the Public Service Commission on the Western Cape Education Department's response to emergency repairs at schools. Those recommendations were accepted and in fact integrated into the standard operating procedures of the department, and I think that's laudable. The complaint management rapid assessment report as well. It was found that the Department of the Premier was highlighted as a best practice department, but that means that we are able to take that to other departments, to other provinces, to see how the Public Service Commission or public service and the public sector can be improved. We've also done a number of inspections at the Department of Social Development last financial year. Given that Commissioner Corson in particular is also a legal scholar, did a number of inspections at magistrates' courts, trying to look at the backlogs, for example, and look at the structure of mag courts. And then finally, as I said, and Chairperson indicated, the Western Cape Citizens Forum was held in Turnblach on the 8th of March 2023, and it was a huge success. Again, because the fundamental part of a Citizens Forum is to bring that service delivery right up to the door of government departments so that there is commitment for change at the end of the day. So, members, that is my presentation, and that is the role and function and the powers of the Public Service Commission. And I just want to implore once again, I think that the role of the Public Service Commission in general is critically important, especially now in this stage of our democracy and where the public service and the public sector finds itself in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jacobs. Honourable members, I see Member Maseko, Member Lecker. No other hands. Online, our colleagues still with us online. Member Klaas. Member Brunkhuis. Doesn't seem like it. In that order. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks for the presentation. Just a quick one. I want to find out, I mean, with the mandate that you do have, how do you evaluate your progress in implementing your mandate effectively? And I'm asking this based on when you compare the provinces, and you say something about Western Cape, but the reality of the services within our country, there's no way that we can be, your mandate will just be focused or being operations in silo that now Western Cape now only, because it has a ripple effect of also affecting Western Cape if things are not done correctly. Now, I want to find out if you assess yourself, the progress you are making is as PSC. Now, how do you look back and say, this is where the shortfalls, and that will be aligned with the changes that you want to see, professionalization, and because that means there is something that triggered that you are seeing. But maybe from my side, the problem that I do have is the reality and the ideas of that you do have, aligning them to make sure that they work effectively within other provinces. I'll make an example. You do have administration in other provinces, and I was asking Minister Mbombo last about the question of when you have some of the provinces that they chronic medication, the patients will come to Western Cape to get their chronic medication, which is, it's a known issue that is happening. When you look at it from my side, I see administration that is failing one way or another. You don't have the capable people that can address that within those provinces. And we do have this institution that can be able to check or diagnose what is the problem, what is it that needs to happen. Now, the other level of the question to that, it will be, when you advise or when you make recommendations, do you see them being implemented? Because this is a ripple effect of some of the organizations, some of the teams that have to, I think the different levels of teams that have to work hard to make sure that we do have the service delivered in this country that works, because you have the AG where it will come to us and say that, the problem is the capacity within some of the departments, or from, as we get the overall report within the country. And then you have to do something else in that. And so alignment and not working in the silo for making sure that at the end we do have what also you can look back and say, we implemented this, we changed this, and it's working. How do you go about to say, you can give us the member, who, Mare, are you talking to me?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Never.
So, yeah. So I just want to find out, how do you make sure that all this that I've mentioned, really they are adding value, or the challenges that you can identify to say, okay, you as legislators, we highlight this. This is where there is a loophole that we feel you can chip in to make sure that we can see progress in what we are trying.
Thank you very much, Member Maseko. I will give over to you, Prof. Fikeni. You can, my indirect, who will respond.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much for that question. I think it is very important. The founders and the framers of our constitution had foresight in creating the Public Service Commission, because it has a footprint nationally, provincially, and now locally. Even within the commissioners, Chapter 10, Section 196 says you have a single commission, even if you are provincially based. We put you in a national, like now, Commissioner from the Western Cape is heading at least 3 national projects and is chairing a specialist team on leadership and management, which oversees the country. That makes it easy for us as the Public Service Commission in our reports, as we receive these reports from the provinces, to say, what is working in which province that we should replicate? Just a few weeks ago, I was in the Free State addressing the MINMAC, invited by the Minister of Police, where you had all the MECs, including the one of the Western Cape, where we were sharing some of these observations, what is working and what is not working. We have cluster commissioners nationally, where we divide departments and say, Commissioner, these are the departments you are primarily going to be interacting with. If there is something of concurrent governance in the Western Cape at national, it doesn't suffer the way other institutions would suffer. You simply channel it through to that. If it's Home Affairs, if it's Department of Education, you do not have all these complications of saying, how are we going to get to national, because it's how it was designed. Not only that, PSC is part of the Forum of Institutions Supporting Democracy. We have MOUs and special partnerships and a common forum with your Chapter 9 institutions and your Chapter 13, which means we're working together and we've been given assignments to help with the coordination of some of the things with the Public Protector, with the AG, with the Human Rights Commission, with, different entities like CRL and so forth. So that makes it easy to be a one-stop shop. That's why we're working with the UNDP on how to realize the district development model, where in national, provincial, local government, different departments, if you go to community A, we can be able to pull all of them and say this is the problem. Hence our approach even in the Citizens Forum. We often bring in national departments, provincial departments, local government departments who are uniquely positioned to do just that. And we look at performance, and if it works, we replicate. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor. Ms. Ngwenya, I'll give you an opportunity, and then Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you very much, Chair, and greetings to honorable members, those that are present here and those that are joining us online, virtually. Thank you very much. I think the chairperson has adequately responded to the question, Member Maseko, but he earlier on in his introductory remarks, he made mention of us repositioning ourselves as a commission, and he has alluded to the singleness of this commission to say, as a national commissioner, I can come and stand in for Commissioner Hussein in the Western Cape because of this unity of purpose and singleness of purpose. But also we have got our plenary, which is a platform of sharing good practices across the country within the 9 provinces as well as the national office. But also you spoke of us, the non-implementation of our recommendations by departments or EA. I think Mr. Jacobs has covered us well when he indicated that the bill that has been approved by Cabinet on the 16th of May aims to strengthen the independence of the PSC to ensure that we adequately fulfill and execute our mandate as an independent and impartial constitutional body. We believe with the approval of this bill, we will be then given the teeth to bite, because currently we are not biting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ngwenya. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you. Just in respect to the question about how do we evaluate our progress. So, unfortunately, in our line of work, you kind of have to be like a dog with a bone. And in respect to that, it's sometimes very difficult to evaluate one's own progress, but I'll deal with specific aspects. So just in terms of the professionalization framework, that started in 2016 by the Public Service Commission when we started our developmental state conference. From 2016 to 2020, we wrote constant reports and papers around and made recommendations around professionalization and the importance of capability. In 2020, we entered into a MOU with the UNDP on a capability. In 2020, the National School of Government drafted and published in the Gazette the draft professionalization framework. The contents of that professionalization framework document came predominantly from the Public Service Commission. I know it because I was aghast when I read it and I saw my own words in there and my own stuff that I wrote. So it's taken from 2016 to 2020 just to get a draft professionalization framework. We had to knock on the door 1,000 times before somebody opened. So that's the one part. It takes a long time. But just in terms of evaluating our own progress, the Public Service Commission or the HSRC currently, through the Public Service Commission, is actually evaluating, doing an impact assessment of our own work. From, I think it was 2014 to 2019, I think, no, from 2014 to 2020. So that also gives us a part of our strategic reposition. That also will give us a nice sort of frame of reference of where we are and what we can change, how we can reposition, what has worked well, what hasn't worked well. And then, and also how do we recognize that shortfall? So that will assist us quite nicely. And then the monitoring of the implementation of recommendations. Once again, you have to be with the dog with the bone. We, just on a matter that I'm just currently dealing with, when the chair was the cluster commissioner for land reform, for agriculture and land reform, we met with the Ministry of Agriculture in 2021 on a report on the restitution, and it was an investigative analysis of the performance of the restitution of the Commission on Restitution on Land Rights. That was in 2021. We have particular recommendations that requires legislative amendments and policy review and the creation of a proper independent commission. We are now scheduled to meet in 2023 with the ministry again on the non-implementation of those recommendations and establishing the progress of that. And the point that I'm making to you is that you have to be a dog with a bone. You have to knock on that door, unfortunately, and sometimes it is a thankless job. But we do it, and I think that, like I said, the HRC will provide us with actually finer detail of where we're going and what our shortfalls are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. I recognize Member Lekker, and then after Member Lekker is Honourable Klaas, and then yourself, Member Syed.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning once again. Chair, maybe let me start on the second last slide, which talks to the turnaround time for filling the commissioner positions. A quick one on that one would be, having been an independent body, what recommendations have been made, particularly to avoid a reoccurrence of failure to fill in the vacancies timeously? Then let me move, Chair. Perhaps let me ask a question particularly around issues of good governance in a quest for accountability. There seems to be a trend, watching TV and having seated in this legislature for the second term now, particularly when questions are asked, you are then referred to your colleagues in the municipality. You can't ask such questions here. To what extent can the issues, particularly of the accountability framework when it comes to the legislatures, how can that be attended to? Because it directly talks to either non-accountability or non-transparency. Then the last one perhaps would be around the issues of capable, fit for purpose appointments. There's been a trend of appointing retired persons as consultants back into government departments. It's worrying. It seems to be occurring over and over again. What systems can be put in place? Would there be a process of ensuring that there are skills built within departments to avoid reappointing retired persons back into the system? Because ideally, one would appoint retired persons when there are commissions or something else. But for a position that could have been filled by someone if there was willingness to build a second layer kind of arrangement within the departments for a seamless transition. So what systems can be put in place to avoid this? Because it sounds very sketchy and it doesn't leave a good taste. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Lekker. Thank you, Prof. I see that you are taking the questions down. For the sake of time and us getting through our program without having to rush this, I'm just going to ask Member Klaas, you can direct your question now.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm just want to ask a few questions, but maybe there will be 2 or 3. That we hear that they said that the PSC, it's now positive, is doing very well, is doing good. And my question, what was the problem? In order for us to see that they did do recap for what is happening, they must give, what confidence they can give us to agree that their position are complete by now. Now, we go to another question that it will be quickly. The recommendation has been explained that the recommendation of the land reform 2021 and now on, it's because it was not implemented. And then they return now to go 2023 for trying to check that recommendation of the land reform are implemented. But if you can see from 2021 till 2023, it's 2 years. Recommendation were not done, nothing. What is their duty? Because they can go and to go and check that there is an implementation of that. But in 2 years, what did the PSC do because of that late time has been delayed for the recommendation? Thank you.
Honourable Member, thank you. Member Syed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and let me thank the Commission for their presence and for taking us through. Mine is I mean, initially I didn't have my hand up, but it's a question based on the response to Member Maseko's question on the fact that the commissioner or commissioners need to be, I think he used the word like dogs, you know. And as a member who has had experience of writing consistently to the commissioner, particularly regarding my own portfolio, education, I can attest to that, because also then we also have to put pressure at times on, so, because I'm sure their workload is also. Just wanted to know I don't know if it's a formal mechanism, but what kind of measures, and it may be a difficult question to respond to, but what kind of measures does the Commission have in place to ensure that once commissioners are appointed and that they do not develop fear for the political establishment? Because you see, part of what Chief Justice Zondo pointed out in the findings of the Zondo Commission was he really pointed out to the rot amongst members of parliament, you know, in terms of members of parliament not holding the executive accountable. So because at times then you would find, and the Public Service Commission is knowing full well that we as members of parliament, I mean, we're playing a central role in terms of the appointment process. That then our recommendations goes to the head of the executive of the state at the provincial level and then at the national level. But it's, I mean, at the provincial, it's mainly provincially managed. With that sensitivity and knowing all of that, and knowing that to be renewed, it will have to come to us again. And given our political affiliations and our political biasness at times, it's sometimes unavoidable. We follow party lines as well. what are the kind of mechanisms that are in place to prevent those kind of fears, so that it doesn't hinder the work of public service commissioners, so they mustn't think, oh no, if I'm going to go too hard on this one, and my post is now up for renewal or whatever, maybe it's going to create a bit of a problem for me, and it speaks in a sense to some of the recommendations of Zondo, given the political environment that we operate in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Syed. Professor Fikeni, over to you and the team.
Thank you very much, honorable members, for those difficult and yet essential questions. The issue of the timeous filling of positions, we adopted a position to start writing to the legislatures and to the Speaker of Parliament almost a year before. That's why we wrote to the Speaker, I wrote to the Speaker of this legislature last year to say, we know in a year's time you're going to have the expiry. We would recommend that you time yourselves, allowing for delays, allowing for the fact that at times, even when you have completed the process, in Mpumalanga, they finish interviews somewhere in February, and National Parliament, I think, somewhere in March, and we have not received the name. And when you ask, they say, no, there's still this security vetting, there's still that, and so forth, allowing for all those. I've arranged and we've met with the Speaker of Parliament to express our challenges with these delays. And we've written, I came here to present to the Speaker to say, please, we want this process to be seamless because it is so strenuous. For example, now, I've had to assign Prof. Makanya to stand in for Northwest when that process we thought would have been completed in October last year. And there were delays, and here we are, we have not received the replacement. He has had to now abandon certain things in order to focus on the province, which has a great strain in terms of departments and many other things that are taking place there. So it is us working closely with you because we can start and initiate the process, but you must finish the race. Working together in that sense. We've done everything to say it's timeless. We have no control over it. We simply remind, but it is in your hands as to when and how this is, timed. The issue of the appointment of consultants, it's one of the things we've raised in our previous reports. AG, they've raised them to say people are paid, but it's so painful when you look for a good lawyer. Once the lawyer is inside, the lawyers start stopping to know the law. They go looking for other lawyers to come and interpret the law and so forth. And we're saying, let that be changed. And you look for the best engineer. Once they're inside, they seem to be possessed by spirits of not being engineers anymore. They become, some people who identify other people outside. We've made our governance complicated. So we're saying as the PSC, let's deal with this common sense deficit, because it's just the lack of common sense where a person is appointed as an expert, but that person appoints others to do exactly the same job. As for the retirees being brought back, we've raised the issue again of the Javelin approach. A person has been this, they prepare certain programs, then they go outside to go catch them. And that in itself but they can be done if, again, we work together. Because I can tell you now, 3 other provinces, because we're an extended arm of the legislature of parliament, they are able to say, PSC, go look at this issue, write a report and bring it back to us. So what I would say, I urge that we work closely, even these inspections. If legislatures and the Chapter 9 institutions were working close together, they would be able to prevent some of these duplications. During the flood disaster in KZN, we received reports which we are discussing in the Forum of Institutions Supporting Democracy of what they call oversight fatigue, where people stopped working on the field, helping people because National Committee of Parliament was coming, it needed a separate report. AG was coming, it needed a separate report. PSC was coming, it needed a separate report. Human Rights Commission was coming, it needed a separate report. And these people fear that once we do the writing and an adjudication of the fact that they didn't cooperate, they may not get their bonuses, they may be reported as non-compliant, and yet those people were supposed to be in the field assisting people. For example, if you are a Home Affairs official, you are assisting people who have lost their IDs. Instead of being in that township, in that informal settlement, you have to rush back to the office because 9 different entities are coming in separately. National Portfolio Committee, Provincial Portfolio Committee, local municipality, each one wants a report. So you start spending time writing reports instead of being in the field. So if we begin to coordinate our approach to some of these things, accountability and several other gaps which are taking place there would be very much, attended to. On the issue of the land restitution, I want to put it this way. PSC was asked to do the work and it provided the report. But it is up to those who commissioned the report to implement. I often say sometimes we will provide the jaws for your biting, but the teeth sometimes belong to either the legislature or to the department to finish the chewing. You commission us to do the report. Tembisa Hospital, we did the report long before the crisis, you see. Baragwanath Hospital, we did the report. Mangaung Prison, we did the report years before. Had those reports been taken seriously, we wouldn't be where we are. But it can only work if PSC, legislature or parliament and the department or executive authorities are working together. Once a report is received, it is not put on shelf number 17. It is known to have been an expenditure of public resources which are scarce and therefore be given life and implementation. And the last one, which Honorable Said has raised, I think it is one of the most important things that we should be reflecting carefully about, and it's not within our control. One part of the process of appointing a commissioner could be professional, but it can also be political. If Province A realize that you are exposing the rot, you are independent, you are not cajoled into towing this line, and you go to that space and the majority of members in that province are not happy with you politically, not professionally, they might just use their crude majority and say, we no longer need this one, we need a compliant one. So we as commissioners are exposed. You know that you could serve one term not because you are not performing, but because you are overperforming. How then do we deal with that? It's how the legislatures themselves, the parliament, introspect on what level of professionalism and maturity in approaching these issues so that performance is seen independently, not subjectively. And then they can deal with those issues. And it is actually the same debate that has come up with the Judicial Service Commission, with the appointment of judges. It has come up with different things because in a country that has a very noisy, argumentative, robust, and sometimes temperamental democracy, you are likely going to see political contestations going to everything that looks like becoming independent. How we deal with that is an assignment for each and every one of the citizens and the patriots. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just very briefly on the two questions around the land restitution recommendations and the measures. Professor Fikini spoke about those measures, but again, I just want to implore the importance of two things here. The professionalization framework on the one hand and the PSC bill on the other. Part of the reason for the PSC bill when we present it now was the importance about strengthening the independence of the Public Service Commission so that you don't have commissioners or a PSC, in fact, that does not do its work without fear or favor as per section 196.2. That's the one thing. The other thing, I sit here, members, as you know, not as a commissioner, but I sit here as a member of a secretariat. And part of my role as a member of secretariat, which I come back to the professionalization framework, is why I'm sitting here. And the independence that I have as a member of the secretariat, despite the fact that my commissioners are here. Because I sit here as an advisor to my commissioners. I sit as a technical expert to my commissioners. So the importance of meritocracy is critical, not only in respect of commissioners, but in terms of the Secretariat of the Public Service Commission or any other body for that matter. So again, just reinforcing the point. Then the third point just around that is measures that we need to, and I think down the line we will consider as the Public Service Commission as we go ahead with the bill and looking at the appointment of commissioners and looking also at the recruitment and selection of commissioners as per the professionalization framework. The second issue that I'm going to deal with is around the question by the member of the land restitution recommendations. So yes, we are meeting with the minister, and yes, we met with the minister in 2021. But we have tabled that report in Parliament in 2022. And we will continue to work through our parliamentary team in the Western Cape to try and seek an audience with Parliament to ventilate the findings and the recommendations of that particular report. So yes, it is like I'm a dog with a bone, and it does take long. But we have not, I think the important point is we have not forgotten about that report. We have tabled it, we're seeking a further audience, and we still want to seek an audience with Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Member Maseko, I see your hand.
Just a quick one. I just want to find out the report that you're talking about, the diagnostic reports, who receives them, then how can we access them?
Thank you very much. Member Mare.
I feel much better coming after listening to the three than what I felt when I entered this room. I just want one question. The bill which you have presented to Parliament, so they must accede to it, will that sort out all our problems? Are you sure that when I walk out of here, I can walk with a lighter step, that the public sector will be in a far better condition if your recommendations are accepted? I've just heard that you made recommendations regarding the hospitals and things which was never seen to, and that's why it became a flop and a contentious issue. Do you see this bill as the panacea of all our problems? Or is this the beginning of even more adjustments in future? This is just opening the gate for further improvements to your role as a protector of the public interest.
Thank you very much, Member Mare. That was short and sweet. Member Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. This will be shorter and sweeter, not difficult, but certainly essential. I'm not sure who this question is directed to, but it's simple. With the professionalization of the public service, to what extent are the unions involved? And is there any chance of them hampering the professionalization of the public service? Thank you, Chair.
Much member. Professor Fikeni.
Well, thank you very much for those questions again. The first one, how do we access these reports, which Honorable Maseko asked for, Honorable Chair? We are accountable to you. Any report you need, you can get it. Whether it was written 10 years ago, 6 years ago, and so forth. And on top of that, where you said as the legislature, go look at this. We are your extended arm. We don't meet for compliance purpose. Where you feel we need to have joint, visit to this, or we have to share oversight visits or the inspection models that we're using, we are at your disposal. Hence, we account to you. We don't primarily account to the executives, we account to the legislature. As a result, in other provinces, which is something we're trying to standardize, PSC has a standing item to present to the entire legislature its report. And they go with it. In the Eastern Cape, more recently, the Parliament asked, go look at these schools that have problems. We've just finished giving reports. We took all commissioners, national and others, to go look into that. And they have revealed some of the things that they were not even aware of. Even the one of the mortuaries, government mortuaries, where we find bodies which have been there for 4 years, 5 years, to say what is happening. And they say, we are in control of the mortuary, but municipalities are in control of paupers' burials when municipality doesn't agree and so forth. So all those kinds of things, but we are at your disposal. There's nowhere where you will say we want this report and PSC say, no, this is our report, because it is yours. That's the key thing. Now, on the PSC bill, is it a panacea? How I'm going to answer this, honorable member? Every greatest monument, wonders of the world, whether it's Chinese wall or the pyramids or anything, was made because each brick was chiseled, and ultimately it contributed to the whole. No brick on its own was the final answer, but it was part of the building block. Hence, we talk of the PSC bill, which will put us in a better position to be autonomous, but on its own, it's not sufficient. Hence, we talk of professionalization, which will also add to trying to make sure that we reimagine the public service of the future. having done all the comparative analysis of countries beyond us and so forth. So nothing is a panacea, but it could be a panacea if every one of us worked towards that common cause, because every element that makes these things work will be key. But I want to close, Chair, by saying, on that issue which was raised on the political vulnerability of the commissioners, the reason judges are given a particular term, the reason public protector is given a particular term. I just spoke in the farewell of Professor Makhoba, who has finished his 7 years as a health ombuds. You know, he has written these scathing reports. They set it to be 7 years non-renewable for a reason, because he knows that once given that autonomy and independence, there is no interference, he's not coming back and so forth. But the PSC, unfortunately, after 5 years, it has to come to the legislature, to parliament and so forth and so on. But the beauty, though, on the independence is that no single commissioner, including the chairperson, takes decisions. We are structured such that the panel of experts, the fellow commissioners, take decisions collectively. And there are legal experts, there are several other ways of making sure, even if politicians were whispering in your ear to say, move this way or move that way, you take it to the plenary or the panel. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fikeni. I think that deals with the questions from members this morning. Please allow me to thank you, Ms. Ngwenya, Mr. Jacobs, and then Ms. Gwaza, Mr. Goba. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. I think that from our side as an ad hoc committee, we do realize the extreme importance of this committee, and we have a better understanding and insight as to what the role entails of this particular person that needs to be recommended and ultimately appointed. So it was very important for us to have this briefing this morning, and I am very much sure that going forward with the process, we would be able to refer back, and from where we will go on to the advertising process and the interview processes. All of what has been shared with us this morning will obviously become part of us making sure that we do our work in the correct manner and with the relevant transparency to it. Perhaps just the last question from my side in terms of the advertising for the position. I have seen a very generalized and standard advertisement. Professor Fikeni, in your opening remarks, you did make mention that obviously you will, when you advertise, that advertisement will be for when someone sees it, someone should relate to that in terms of the skill set, with its qualifications, but also that personal attributes that you made mention of. In your view and your experience, what is it that such an advertisement should contain in order for us to attract the correct candidates for this position?
Thank you very much for that question. I do think that it is both in the advert and in the actual process of selection. Because you could say a person must be a person of integrity. But how do you determine that when people are so elegant in preparing for interviews? So the lived and the actual experience of a person become the crux of those situations. But at this stage, one, the understanding and the appreciation of the role of the public service, the understanding of the administrative laws governing that, but you'll have noticed that what we were presenting here is not only what is there and what has been there. We are undergoing major reforms in public service. Is that person poised to understand these changes which are taking place? Because the person could be very good for what happened in 2017. But what is most important is what is going to happen in 2024 going forward. COVID-19, for example, trained us to deal with e-governance almost at a speed, online situation. What will be the public service of the future? So that person should both be grounded in the experience now, but have the creativity and imaginations going forward. Must have the understanding of public service and public administration and the current reforms. Because if not, it takes some time for anyone to settle into that space, and the train is moving very fast. I've seen some commissioners who come from the outside, 6 months later, they are still trying to settle down. 8 months later, they are beginning to grasp certain things, and things are moving very fast. So that is at times the challenge. And we speak of the reports, the forensic this and so forth. Myself on the first meeting, whilst I thought I had PhD, I had taught public administration and so forth, I sat there, it was like people were speaking in tongues. I had to spend inordinate amount of time in the office trying to understand this law, this legislation and so forth. So it is a fast-moving train that should both reflect in the advert the competencies of today, but the foresight for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Mare? Sure.
Do you know, I as a member of parliament, many a time my children come to me and says, Dad, I applied for this or that, but they want to know if I have anybody in parliament or connected. And I've got to say yes. I have to say yes, that's my daughter and she's my daughter. And is that a condition that a commissioner shouldn't be a member or aligned to any political party? If not, why not?
Once you are a commissioner, you cannot be partisan, because whoever brings grievances or anything, even if you are active in your branch meetings, you start disappearing from those spaces because it will crowd your mind. You will start working as a party agent. In our case, we want a person who comes in and say, I have this problem in the public service, and we deal with that problem. Not to say how do we assist this party or that party, this ideology or that ideology. That is the main thrust of our work. We've received a number of complaints from different political parties. To us, it is not important as to which party it comes from. The essence of the problem is what we are looking at. And more importantly, the lessons from the kinds of problems. We no longer just say there's this grievance that has come. For example, there was a case of a student who did not receive the matric certificate for a year. So they wrote to us. To us, we said, it's not just writing to the minister and the DG as to why this person has not received the certificate, but to further ask how many other people in the country will never know the PSC are suffering from this problem so that we solve it right across. So the partisanship, it's very important that you don't get people who are politically active and whose political inclinations and instincts cannot separate this now non-partisan professional space where the public is key to the service, not the party.
Thank you very much, Professor Vakene. Colleagues, we will now at this stage excuse the Public Service Commission. We will have a leg stretch and be back at 11:25, after which Mr. James Retief, that have been very patiently been part of the entire session. Thank you, Mr. Retief, will be taking us through the advertising process. And then Mr. Vernon Titus, who also has joined us, will take us through the security clearance process. So, yes, there is coffee in the members' lounge, and you are most welcome to join us. Thank you very much. Please be back in time at 25 past. Thanks, members. we do have a quorum. I think Mr. Van Beelen must just take note that this committee won't be having any breaks in future. We'll just do the vote on the table. Thank you, members, for joining. We still have 2 presentations to go. Mr. James Retief, thank you so much for joining this committee this morning, and we look forward to your briefing in terms of the advertising process for this vacancy. And after which members will have the opportunity to pose questions to you. And immediately after that, Mr. Vernon Titus, thank you so much for joining. You will then present to us in terms of the security clearance process needed for this specific vacancy. And members will then also have the opportunity to engage in questions. Immediately over to you. Thank you, Mr. Retief.
Thank you, Chairperson, members. So I think for the advertisement of the position, the first thing that there needs to be a decision about is whether the advertisement is going to be placed in the print media as usual in newspapers, whether it's also going to be done online or whether it's going to be a combination of both, etc. So in terms of the print media advertisement, we would need to get the copy, the contents for the advertisement from the committee. We will get our graphic designer to do the design and layout, and then we would procure the advertising space in the newspaper according to whatever specifications are determined, and then that would run as a normal print advert. In terms of what we propose for online, the same advert we would use and we would post on our website on our vacancies page. We would then need to have some kind of application form or whatever the process is that the committee decides on to invite the applications. And then on the home page of the website, on our slide carousel, we would then have a slide that would kind of announce the position and then guide applicants to that page. We would then also support that by using our Twitter and Facebook accounts, and it would link to that page on our website, and we would work out a campaign for the duration, or until the closing date rather, of that advertisement. So we would do it every so many days or whatever the case may be. Sorry. And then lastly, to really boost the distribution of the advert, we could then also do a paid for advertising campaign on Facebook. And then we would use the parameters determined by the committee in terms of what audience we would like to target. And then that would then achieve quite a big reach. I can just mention that we did a paid for advertising campaign for the official opening and SOPA in February. And we, with not a very big budget, we reached an audience of 1 million people in the Western Cape. So it is quite a cost-effective way of reaching a big audience. So, Chairperson, that is what the long and short of it is.
Thank you so much, Mr. Retief. I see Member Fry.
Thank you, Chairperson. A question regarding the wording of the advert. Would the Public Service Commission not want input on the wording of the advert as well? Because I don't know if it's prudent to leave it to us where we're not sure. We're not the employer of the Public Service Commissioner. So whether the wording of the advert will be, who will be doing the wording of the advert? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Fry, and perhaps just from my side, we have to by September fill this vacancy. September 30th of September. So in terms of the time frames, do you have an idea as to what you have proposed, Mr. Retief, as to when what should happen to make sure that we meet the deadline in terms of closing of applications?
Chairperson, I haven't specifically considered that, but if we're saying the position needs to be filled by the 30th of September. Is that correct? So if we consider that the person might be employed, that they would need to give a month's notice, you're probably looking at doing interviews sometime in July or August. And then there would be the vetting process that will take approximately 3 weeks. So I would suggest then that the committee would then look at doing the interviews probably in July then, to leave August for vetting and then September for the person to give 30 days notice if that's required. So we would then want to advertise the position, I would say in the second week of June at the latest, and probably run the advert for 3 weeks.
Thanks, Mr. Retief. And in terms of the wording?
Chairperson, if I remember correctly, the professor from the PSC did speak about, I think, he was mentioning a template or some kind of standard wording. So I think the committee would need to get that from the PSC and then obviously just adjust it to the Western Cape's requirements.
Thank you very much. I'm just perhaps going to ask Mr. Vermeulen as well for the record. We have a template or draft advert with us. He got it from, I think, 5 years back, the advert. So at this point, will we then, as this committee, we can obviously make amendments to it? Yeah?
Chairperson, yes, obviously we can make amendments to it. That was just a standard template as a starting point. But I think with the things that Professor Fikeni mentioned today, I can obviously work some of those things into the advertisement, some of the points that he gave. And obviously then run it by you, and then maybe we can just mail it to the members and they can give the go-ahead. Maybe that will just take a day or two, maybe less. But yeah, I think we can update it because Professor Fikeni did say a few things that I think we can include there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vermeulen. Then Member Bosman and then Member Syed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just in terms of places to advertise, I think we need to consider advertising on recruitment sites as well, specifically LinkedIn. The audience for this job might be sort of professionals who would be on those sites. And then just in terms of the timeline, I'm not quite sure if my memory serves me right, but the Premier or the provincial candidate nominated has to be appointed by the President, isn't it? So we also need to factor in that period as well, because the Premier has to send that nomination to the President, and the President still has to do their own vetting to ensure that the person is fit and proper as well. So I think we might just need to get some guidance in terms of the Act. If I remember correctly, there is the appointment goes from the committee, from Parliament to the Premier, and from the Premier to the President. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I think as part of our resolutions, Mr. Vermeulen, that we, in the next few days, please just have that timeline as of what transpired today. We had the briefing. We have to embark now on the advertising process, which runs for, is it 3 weeks, Mr. Retief?
Yeah, I would say that that's minimum.
3 weeks would be sufficient. And also with the recommendations stipulated by Mr. Retief, but also by Member Bosman as to where we should be advertising this position. Member Syed?
Thank you, Chairperson. Just on the point raised by Member Fry, and I think the response was by Mr. Vermeulen on the advert. I think maybe just to be safe, let's do those additions that Mr. Vermeulen has picked up from the professor, and then let's just, and I don't think it should take long, let's just send it to the PSC so they can just see, look, is there anything that they want to add? Is it in line? Is it fine? And then we move from there. Thank you. Other than that, I support the other proposals.
Sure. Thank you, Member Syed. I'm sure we would be able to do that. Thank you so much, members. If there is no any any other questions for Mr. Retief? Thank you so much. Mr. Titus?
Thank you, Chair. The process for the security vetting is a fairly straightforward process. As you had already alluded to, Chair, this has been done previously, 5 years ago. So it's a simple request to the Sergeant at Arms, who's unfortunately in another meeting at the moment. So simple request to the Sergeant at Arms. The Sergeant at Arms sends this to the State Security Agency, and I think that is where Mr. Bosman's question, the Honourable Bosman's question is coming in around the full vetting of a fit and proper person. So it's done through the State Security Agency as well. They will look based on the identity number of the various candidates, their criminal record, their creditworthiness, their corroborating their expertise and experience as identified and reflected in the curriculum vitae. They had indicated to us that it will take about 3 weeks, at maximum a month, to be able to conclude on all of the business. What I do also think part of the work of the committee is obviously to look at the fit and proper aspects from a lifestyle perspective, which will be checked through the State Security Agency. And I think the other part of the work of this committee will obviously be looking at the fit and proper part from an experience, expertise, and the recruitment process. So while the recruitment part and identifying where the people have the candidates have the gravitas to be able to fulfill the responsibility, I think that aspect falls within the recruitment part of the work and not in the suitability checks. I think that aspect, and I think in previous processes there had been opportunity to enlist further assessments, competency-based assessments that could also be completed as part of the process. But I want to just finish it off there. So the suitability checks, ma'am, is Sergeant at Arms, State Security Agency. You indicate the IDs, the CVs, and that is then done via the State Security Agency for all of those aspects. They provide feedback to us directly right to this committee then.
Just honourable members, any questions, comments, inputs? Nothing? Thank you so much. I think you've been of great assistance, especially in terms of the timelines for us now to make sure that we do meet the deadlines. Obviously, you're in-house, so we can always come knock on your door. Thank you so much for indulgence. Much appreciated. You are excused. Mr. Retief?
And just plot the timeline in more detail.
Yes.
And then we can, then Johan can share it with the committee.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So members, obviously going forward in terms of an actual date for interviews would be determined by these processes. So it is quite urgent, Mr. Vermeulen, that we get that proposed timeline for the committee to agree on, so that we know exactly what time frame we're working with.
Can I speak?
Sure.
Chairperson, thanks. Yes, I understand that. I just want to mention that we must just keep in mind now that we've scheduled, and I know that can change, our next meeting for 5 July.
Yep.
There is a possibility that we may not make that meeting. We may have to move it out. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if I look at, if we update the advertisement now, the draft advertisement, and we send it to members and to the PSC, I'm not sure by what time we're going to get input and finality and sign off, because you need to sign off the advert at the end of the day. And the other question that we haven't really answered yet, which will influence the timeline, is Mr. Retief's briefing was options of the advertising campaign. But if we are going to advertise in print media, that does extend the deadline. It makes it very difficult for me, because we follow a process where we go to ECM, supply chain management, and we get quotes and things. So I can say to the committee it's going to take one week. And then we need translations and all sorts of things. So there's many factors that influence that. So I'm just saying that it won't be a huge influence. It can be by a week or two, but that could ensure that if we have to advertise for 3 weeks, like James said, that it could maybe push out that timeline of the 5th. And the 5th is the next meeting date when this committee would want or planned to meet to shortlist. So by that time, I need to have received all the CVs and have sent it to members, and that's administration involved in that as well. So looking at the timelines, and at that meeting then, the committee would have wanted to decide who to bring in for interviews, but also first, once the committee shortlisted, let's say on the 5th of July, then the committee would want to give the ID numbers through to Vernon Titus and to do the check via the State Security Agency, which could either take 3 or 4 weeks, we don't know. Because it's an outside body, and from past experience, yes, they can say 3 weeks, but it can take 5 weeks maybe. So we must just keep those things in mind. It's very difficult to be clinical with the dates right now. So, but to just summarize, Chairperson, I think we must, or the committee must just decide whether they're going to go print media as well, or whether all these other advertising campaigns on social media and LinkedIn and whatever James can do for us, for the committee, whether the committee just wants to go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to propose, members, that the next meeting date, which is the 5th of July, and where we are supposed to deal with the shortlisting process, that we keep that date in the program as is. There are certain processes that can run concurrently. That is that once we have concluded the shortlisting process, to submit those ID documents and CVs for the relevant vetting to be done. Also, I think that we need to give you a mandate, Mr. Vermeulen, as to are we going the social media route, or are we going the print media route, or are we doing both? And also, if we do the print media route, which publications does members see more effective for this specific position, so that you can start the procurement process? Member Bosman?
I think we need to just maybe look at doing English, Afrikaans, and isiXhosa, and make sure that we cover the length and breadth of the province. So if we do Die Burger for Afrikaans, we can maybe do one of the English newspapers, and then we could look at doing one of the regional newspapers for isiXhosa as well.
Which publications is that, member?
I think there's 2 isiXhosa publications. They might be in the community newspaper stable, so it might be different, but we'll just have to check. Perhaps we can just look at the last advert that we placed to see which ones we did.
Sure.
Just quickly, I can go back to the office and I can just check which of the isiXhosa newspapers has the best circulation. It's either the Citizen and the other one I forgot. It's again City Vision. Is it City Vision and Vukani? Sorry, remember City Vision and Vukani. It's either one of them. And for the English one, I'll just check as well. And the burger should be fine for Afrikaans. But obviously, it's for the person who's going to be a resident in Cape Town. The office is here, so.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And if I hear the members correctly, we will be exploring both avenues, print media as well as social media. Are you happy with that, Mr.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, so we will have a close look and be able to give input into the timeline that will be provided to us. Then, Mr. Vermeulen, our final business for today, we have some committee minutes of the 3rd of May.
Chairperson, I'll bring it up on the screen as fast as I can. I'm not good with technology.
Members, you have it on your laptops, members.
Is that too big now? Maybe that's too big. Let's see.
The 3rd of May, the minutes. Check your attendance. Apologies at the time.
just move this a little bit. I think that's better.
Dealt with the minutes of the 16th, matters arising.
I think that's the resolutions, Chair.
Yeah. Resolutions at point 3, you agree, members, that that is the true reflection? And then we ended our meeting off. Can I get a proposer?
Chair, before you do that, I see my name is not mentioned as one of the people that apologized. I had a clash of meetings in the WCPP.
Thank you very much, Member Seleko. We will amend the minutes accordingly.
Thank you, Chair.
To include your apology. Member Fry?
No, I move that we adopt the minutes as amended.
Thank you very much. A seconder? Member Bosman. Honourable colleagues, thank you so much for your indulgence. We will keep in touch. We have a very tight schedule, so we will need, as soon as we send out the documentation, perhaps we must establish a WhatsApp group. Member Bosman is not agreeing to it, but sometimes it's just quicker to post some things on the WhatsApp group and members just can give it a thumbs up or indicate otherwise, as members are not always with their laptops in order to read their emails. So we promise not to send the morning and the afternoon and the evening messages, sleep tight and good morning and all that. It will just strictly be committee business. Thank you very much, honourable members. You must have a most blessed day and week ahead. Thank you so much for our procedural support. We appreciate you.
It's a pleasure.
Meeting is adjourned.